They say betrayal doesn't break you all at once. It hollows you out in pieces, quiet as a whisper, until one day you wake up and there's nothing left inside but the echo of a life you used to live. My name is Paul Travers. I built things. Homes. Decks. Kitchens. I believed in hard work, in keeping your word, in trusting the people you eat dinner with. And for that, I lost everything. My wife. My business. My name. It didn't happen in some fiery explosion. It came with paperwork, smiles, and signatures. The man I called my best friend took my company. The woman I shared my bed with poisoned my reputation. And the boy I raised as my own looked at me like a stranger. But I didn't vanish. I watched. I waited. I peeled back the lies they wrapped around me like barbed wire. And when the time came, I didn't shout. I didn't swing. I exposed. This isn't a story about forgiveness. It's about precision. About what happens when the man you tried to erase decides to write the ending himself. This is Ashes of Trust, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I got my revenge. Before we dive into the story, we'll love to thank you for your continued support to this channel. If you enjoy this story and stories like this, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification button so you don't miss any of our stories. We will love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments section. We'll love to give you a shout out in our next video. Now let's begin. I was laying tile in a client's mudroom the morning it all started to unravel, pressing each square into place with the kind of careful rhythm that quiets the mind. My knees ached, and the late spring heat crept through the open garage like a warning I didn't yet hear. That job was nothing special, just a ranch house on the edge of town, but I remember it because it was the last time work felt simple. The last time I had somewhere to be, something useful to offer, and a phone that buzzed with a purpose other than dread. My crew was late, as usual. Doug, my foreman, texted that they had to swing by the supply yard. I didn't think much of it. I trusted Doug. He'd been with me 8 years, long enough to know how I liked things done, long enough that I let him run the books when I was buried in labor. I used to think trust was the same thing as loyalty. That day taught me different. Back home, Ellen was quiet. That wasn't unusual either. Our rhythm had changed over the past few months, like the air had thinned between us, but I chalked it up to stress. Mason, my stepson, had just turned 16 and started pulling away in that way boys do when they're trying to prove something. I thought we were just adjusting. I thought time would smooth it out. We'd been together 9 years, Ellen and I. She was sharp, organized, could handle pressure better than me sometimes. I leaned on her more than I should have. I didn't see it then, but looking back, there were signs. Slippery little moments that only make sense once they've already gutted you. Like the way she'd ask about upcoming contracts, not out of interest, but with this tension behind her voice, like she was counting something. Or how Doug started showing up early to talk logistics, never when I was home. That evening, Ellen made lasagna. I remember the smell coming up the stairs, the clink of dishes, the low hum of the news on the kitchen TV. It felt almost staged, like she was trying too hard to be normal. I sat down across from her and Mason, joking about the tile job, talking about the neighbor's busted fence, not knowing it'd be the last dinner we'd share under that roof. Ellen laughed in the right places. Mason didn't say much. He kept looking between us, like he was waiting for a signal. Afterward, I went to the garage to check invoices. Doug hadn't emailed the receipts from the supply run. I sent him a quick reminder, then went to bed. I didn't know then that Doug hadn't been to the supply yard at all. He'd been at the bank, with Ellen. The next morning, I got served. A woman in a gray blazer knocked on the front door just as I was pulling on my boots. She handed me a thick envelope, smiled like she was sorry, and walked away before I could even blink. I stood there, one boot on, staring at the papers. Divorce. Allegations of fraud. Misuse of business funds. Hidden assets. I read it 3 times before I could even sit down. Ellen walked in like she was coming back from a jog, hair pulled back, water bottle in hand, fake calm in her eyes. "You should read it carefully," she said. "It's all explained." Like I'd gotten a parking ticket, not a death sentence. I asked her what this was, what the hell she was talking about. She said things hadn't been working for a while, that it was best to move on clean, that she'd spoken with Doug, and he agreed it was time for a new direction. I remember the way her eyes flicked to the papers in my hands. Cold, distant, like she'd already left the room in her mind. I didn't fight her. Not then. I should have. But shock does something to a man. It slows your blood, dulls your instincts. You start thinking maybe you missed something. Maybe she's right. Maybe this is what fairness looks like. I packed a bag, took my tools, and slept in the truck that night. I figured I'd call my lawyer in the morning, sort through the mess. I still thought it was a misunderstanding. I didn't know she'd frozen the accounts, or that Doug had filed paperwork to claim majority ownership of the business, my business. Ellen had helped him, provided signatures, claimed I'd been mismanaging funds, said I was unstable. She was worried about Mason, she told the court. Said I had a temper. Said she didn't feel safe. Within 2 weeks, my licenses were under review, my contracts evaporated, and clients I'd known for years stopped returning my calls. I lost the house. Mason wouldn't return my texts. I saw Doug driving my company truck, smiling, like he'd won something. I remember the way my hand shook when I saw him, like my body knew before my brain could catch up that this wasn't just a loss. This was war. Quiet, polite, paper-wrapped war. And I had nothing left to fight with, except time. Time and the truth. It's strange how quickly your world can shrink. 1 minute, you're juggling bids and deadlines, arguing with drywall suppliers, telling yourself you'll finally take that long weekend. The next, your life fits in the bed of an old Silverado parked behind a storage facility off Route 9, where the security lights flicker and the raccoons aren't afraid of people anymore. I remember laying there that first week, staring at the roof liner and listening to the slow tick of the cooling engine. My back hated me. My pride hated me worse. But the silence, that was the loudest thing. No phone calls. No footsteps overhead. No dinner clatter. No Mason banging cabinet doors looking for cereal. Just the creak of the wind and that stale, mechanical smell that clung to the truck's upholstery like an echo of work that didn't exist anymore. I told myself it was temporary. Just a pause. That I'd bounce back once I got a good lawyer and straighten things out. But lawyers don't work for free, and when every account you have has been locked or bled dry, even their advice starts feeling like another loss. I met with one, sat across from him in a strip mall office where the fake fern in the corner had more life than I did. He skimmed the papers and gave me a look I'd come to recognize, a sort of practiced sympathy that stops just short of real help. It's not good, he said. Your wife's built a pretty compelling case. And your partner, he trailed off, shaking his head like Doug's betrayal was just some unfortunate weather system I'd been caught in. Compelling case. That phrase stuck with me. Not true. Not right. Just compelling. Like truth didn't matter anymore, only the story that sold better. And Ellen's story, polished and professional, was airtight. I wasn't violent, never had been. But she painted me as volatile, impulsive. Too much stress, too little sleep. A man fraying at the edges. Doug backed it all up. My oldest clients swore they were shocked, but in the same breath said they hoped I got the help I needed. No one came to my defense. Not even Mason. And that cut deeper than everything else. It wasn't that I expected him to pick sides. He was just a kid, caught in the middle. But I hoped he'd reach out. A text. A late-night message. Some sign he knew this wasn't who I was. But there was nothing. Just silence. The kind that grows heavy. That first week, I parked in different spots every night. Half out of paranoia, half because I couldn't stand the routine. I'd find an empty lot behind a diner or an old loading dock with weeds growing through the cracks. I kept a gym bag with a change of clothes, a razor, and a worn copy of The Old Man and the Sea I found under the seat. Hemingway always did feel like a kind of permission to hurt, but keep standing. I clung to that. By day, I wandered. Construction sites, hardware stores, job boards. No one would touch me. The rumors had moved fast. One guy, Jimmy Coles, looked downright sad when he told me, "Doug said you were taking some time for mental health." He patted my shoulder like I was a wounded dog. I didn't correct him. What would have been the point? Doug hadn't just taken my company, he'd taken my narrative. And without that, I wasn't just broke. I was invisible. But one night, the silence cracked. I was parked behind an old tire shop, moonlight just barely catching the windshield, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a moment, I didn't even react. Thought it was spam. But then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, I picked it up. 3 texts. Short. Careful. Is it true? About what Mom said? Where are you? Mason. I stared at the screen so long it went dark. My throat closed. I'd been waiting for this, praying for it. But now that it was here, I couldn't breathe. I typed back something simple. I'm okay. Not what she told you. Call me if you can. It felt small. Not enough. But it was all I had in me. No reply came. Not that night. But the line was open. That mattered. In the days that followed, I started noticing little cracks in the walls they'd built around me. A job site I used to supervise had shut down early, permit problems, they said. The city inspector was a friend, and when I ran into him at a gas station, he mentioned Doug's name with a frown. He's not you, he muttered. That's for damn sure. I didn't press him, but something shifted in me. That was the first hint that Doug wasn't as smooth as he pretended. I began digging, slowly, like brushing dirt off something buried deep. Not revenge, not yet. I just needed to know what had really happened. Because something in Ellen's clean, precise betrayal didn't add up. It was too surgical, too coordinated. And as I started tracing back the threads, bank records, business filings, subcontractor whispers, I found the first knot. A credit card I didn't recognize, opened in my name, used at restaurants I'd never been to. The charges started 6 months before Ellen served me. One was dated the night I was out of town for a job bid in Indianapolis. That wasn't just bad bookkeeping. That was intent. It was small, sure, but it was a lie. A solid, provable lie. And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel helpless. I felt angry. And I wasn't done digging. When something's been stolen from you, your name, your work, your blood and sweat, it doesn't scream. It whispers. A quiet little scratch in the back of your mind that won't shut up until you do something about it. That fake credit card, the one Ellen opened under my name, was the first real voice I'd heard since the fall. And it was enough. Just enough to shake me loose from the fog I'd been drifting in. I sat in the cab of the truck that night. Credit reports spread across the steering wheel. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't just surviving. I was tracking. I was hunting. The card had been used 5 times. All in town. 2 dinners, 1 hardware store, a spa of all places, and a motel on the edge of county lines. The dates were spaced out, almost careful, like someone had been testing the boundaries. The motel caught my eye. I remembered that place. A low-roofed spot with a busted ice machine and a neon vacancy sign that flickered like it was dying. It wasn't the kind of place Ellen would ever step into. Not without a reason. So I went there. I parked 2 blocks down and walked in around midnight, wearing a ball cap low over my face and an old denim jacket that still smelled like caulk and sawdust. The guy at the desk didn't look up from his phone. I asked if they had security footage from the night of April 18th. He said they didn't keep it past 2 weeks, but I could see the lie twitch in his cheek when he said it. I slipped him $40, then 60, and finally 100 before he sighed and disappeared into the back. 10 minutes later, he came out with a USB stick and a look that said he didn't want to know what it was for. I watched it on a borrowed laptop in the public library the next morning, behind a row of sleepy teenagers pretending to do homework. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped. At 10:14 p.m., a car pulled in, a Navy crossover. Ellen's car. At 10:17, the passenger door opened, and Doug stepped out. My throat went tight. I already knew they were in it together, but seeing them, turned theory into bone-deep reality. Doug laughed as he tossed his bag over his shoulder. Ellen followed. Her body language relaxed, familiar. Not the tension of a secret meeting. The comfort of routine. They'd been here before. My hand clenched into a fist on the desk, knuckles going white. No one around me noticed. Kids kept scrolling, tapping away at phones, while I sat there with a storm in my chest. Not because they'd slept together. I already suspected that. But because they were so casual about it. Like they'd rehearsed. Like they thought I'd never look deep enough to find this. That smugness lit something in me I hadn't felt since the day I lost the business. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. I took screenshots, cataloged timestamps, started matching them to receipts. A pattern emerged. Same nights, same lies. Cross-referenced with Ellen's emails, ones I still had access to, thanks to a shared cloud backup she'd forgotten about. And I found more. Appointments that didn't exist, dinner reservations under fake names, payments to a private P.O. box I'd never heard of. It was like finding a trapdoor in a house I'd built myself. Every board, every beam, suddenly felt suspect. But that's the thing about betrayal. It only works if you never think to check. A week passed. Then another. I stayed under the radar, sleeping in different places, working odd jobs under the table, pressure washing, drywall patching, even one night scrubbing graffiti off a church wall. But at night, I hunted, piece by piece, until I had enough to file a report of identity theft. The cop who took it didn't seem to care much. Small-town officer with a belly too big for his vest and eyes half shut from boredom. But it was a start. A mark in the system. A weight on the scale. And I knew something else, too. If Ellen and Doug had made one mistake, there were more. All I had to do was keep pulling the thread. Then Mason messaged again. He said, "I heard you were at the motel. What were you doing?" My stomach dropped. Not at the question. At the implication. Someone was watching. I asked him where he heard that. He didn't answer right away. Then, Mom said you're trying to ruin her. That you're spying. I stared at those words like they were fire. Not because they hurt, though they did, but because they confirmed something I hadn't fully let myself believe. Ellen wasn't scared. She was worried. I was getting too close. Too loud. And if Mason knew, then she was using him. Feeding him a version of the story meant to scare him off me. That realization settled hard in my gut. She was playing the long game. She'd planted the seed months ago, maybe longer, painting me as unstable, unhinged. And now that I was digging, she was leaning in, trying to cut me off before I got traction. But she'd made a mistake. She underestimated me. Thought I'd break, crawl off, and disappear. What she didn't know, what Doug didn't know, was that I'd stopped living in that world where fairness mattered, where you played by rules. The truth didn't need to scream. It just needed to be patient. And I had nothing but time now. I typed back to Mason, "I'm not spying. I'm defending myself. One day, you'll see what they did." And deep down, I knew I wasn't just defending anymore. I was planning to destroy them. There's a shift that happens when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I do with this?" It doesn't come all at once. It's quiet, slow, like frost spreading across glass in the early hours of morning. But when it arrives, it changes everything. I stopped thinking like a man trying to get his life back. That man was gone. Doug and Ellen killed him. I started thinking like a man with nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. I spent the next month doing two things, getting leverage and becoming invisible. The first part meant getting smart. I started showing up to city planning meetings, quiet in the back row, listening. Not many folks knew that public records are just sitting there for anyone to read. Permit applications, inspection logs, bids on city projects, it's all accessible if you know where to look. Doug, ever the fool in a suit, had started angling for a county contract on a new municipal annex. He submitted bids under the company name he stole from me. But here's the thing. He'd inflated labor costs, used my old supplier names without updating their contact info. Lazy, sloppy, and illegal. I made copies, took notes, recorded dates. Then I went to the office of the Inspector General and left an anonymous tip. I didn't need to be loud, just precise. The second part, becoming invisible, was trickier. I shaved my beard, changed my walk, started wearing secondhand clothes 2 sizes too big. I let people think I'd left town. Even Mason stopped messaging. Maybe Ellen told him I was unstable again, off the grid. Good. The more they forgot me, the more careless they'd become. And they did. Doug started showing up at the nicer restaurants in town, driving that company truck like it was his crown. I watched him once from across the street, saw him tip the valet with a smug little nod. I followed him to a private gym where he spent an hour pretending to be important. I stood just long enough to see who he was talking to. One of the city developers. I took pictures. Every little piece mattered. Every crack in their armor would become a wedge if I timed it right. But the best part? The financials. Ellen, for all her precision, had one fatal flaw: greed. She didn't just take my accounts, she started laundering money through them. Maybe she thought I'd never access them again. Maybe she thought I was too broken to try. But one of the accounts, the business one, had a backdoor login I'd built years ago when we got hacked. I'd never told anyone about it, not even Doug. When I opened it and saw 5 transfers to an unregistered LLC with Ellen's name as a signer, I smiled for the first time in months. I documented everything, built a file. Not just screenshots, but notarized letters, timestamps, purchase logs. I even hired a temp worker at the county office to send me copies of Doug's permit revisions. It cost me half of what I had left, but it was worth it. Because once you can prove fraud on government contracts, people start listening. Especially the kinds of people Ellen and Doug never thought would look twice. That's when I called my old friend, Dean Harker. Used to be a contractor too, retired now, spends most of his time fly fishing and bad-mouthing politicians. But he owed me a favor from back when I saved his crew from a lawsuit by doing emergency flood work at cost. I handed him the whole file. Didn't ask him to lie, just to show it to the right people. Dean's one of those guys people still believe when he talks. And he talked. 2 weeks later, Doug's company got hit with a formal audit. The news ran it low-key, irregularities in bidding process, kind of headline. But I could tell Doug knew. His smile shrank. He stopped driving the truck. His gym visits stopped too. Ellen kept up appearances, but I could feel the tremble behind the facade. Her perfect little kingdom was teetering, and I was just getting started. Then Mason messaged again. Just one line. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know what he meant. I asked. He didn't reply for hours. When he finally did, it broke something in me. About the money. The fake account. Mom said you did it to protect yourself. But now her friend, Mrs. Delaney, says there's an investigation. That you didn't steal it. That she did. I sat in the cab, reading it over and over. The kid was starting to see it. The cracks were becoming fractures. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something like hope. Not for reconciliation. That wasn't the goal anymore. But for truth. For something real to finally reach him. I told him everything. Carefully. Not with blame. Not with anger. Just the facts. And I ended with this. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But some people only give you one option. And now? Now I had more than proof. I had control. There's a moment in every hunt where the prey still thinks it's safe. Still grazes the field like nothing's wrong, while your shadow inches closer through the grass. That was where Doug and Ellen were. Still throwing backyard parties with fairy lights and catered sushi. Still smiling for Facebook posts like they'd earned everything they had. They hadn't yet heard the snap of the twig behind them. But I was there. I was close. And I was done waiting. I didn't want just satisfaction. I wanted exposure. I wanted their names to turn bitter in people's mouths. Not through drama. Not through rumor. Through evidence. I started with the accountant. She used to do part-time tax prep for us back when the business was smaller. Her name was Laura Witt. Quiet woman, liked cats, and always smelled faintly of peppermint tea. I hadn't seen her in years, but I remembered one thing: she hated fraud. Hated it like a religion. So I paid her a visit. brought a folder, laid everything out in her little home office while her cat perched on the window, blinking slow like it could feel the tension in the room. I didn't beg. I just asked her to verify what I already knew. She read in silence for 15 minutes. Then she looked up and said, "This is enough to sink them." That was the first domino. Next came the city council meeting. I didn't speak at first. I just handed a copy of the file to a reporter from the Glenway Herald. Young guy. Eager. He'd been sniffing around the audit, trying to figure out why the contract had suddenly stalled. I watched his face as he flipped through it. You could see the thrill spark behind his eyes. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a story. 3 days later, the article ran on the front page. Local contractor under investigation for bid rigging, fraudulent transfers. They even ran pictures, Doug shaking hands with city officials, smiling like a man with nothing to hide. The story didn't mention me. I made sure of that. I didn't want the attention. I wanted the collapse. And oh, did it begin? Doug tried to play it cool, gave some boilerplate denial. But then the state licensing board launched a secondary probe. The bank froze the disputed accounts. Subcontractors stopped returning his calls. His fancy pickup vanished. Probably repossessed. Ellen? She kept her head high for about a week, showed up to yoga, posted her usual motivational quotes. But I heard from a neighbor that she screamed at a delivery guy for leaving a box too close to her roses. Her control was slipping. You could smell it in the air. And then came the school board meeting. Mason's high school had one of those parental volunteer committees. Ellen used to chair it. Organize bake sales, plan fundraisers. I hadn't planned to be there, but Mason messaged me the night before. She's still pretending like nothing happened. No one knows the truth. That was all I needed. I showed up early. Didn't sit. Just waited outside. When the meeting let out, I stepped up beside the table, handed a folder to the principal. "This is relevant," I said. "And legal." He looked at it, confused, then shocked. I turned and left before the crowd even opened their mouths. By the next morning, Ellen had stepped down from the committee. Personal reasons, she claimed. But the school board didn't miss the timing. I never raised my voice. Never sent a threatening message. I just let the truth speak for me. But what shook them most wasn't the collapse. It was Mason. Because 2 nights later, he called. Not texted, called. His voice sounded older, rawer. Like someone who'd walked through fire barefoot and still hadn't stopped. He didn't say much. Just, "I saw the files. I know now. I'm sorry." I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat in the truck, phone to my ear, heart steady for the first time in months. That boy had been twisted into a weapon and tossed aside like shrapnel. But he found his way back. Not because I forced him, but because the lies fell apart under their own weight. And now? Doug was under state investigation. Ellen's accounts were flagged. Her social circles evaporated. All those people who once smiled at their parties had gone silent, afraid to stand too close to the smoke. I had done it, but not with fists, not with fury, with truth and patience. And one final step still waited. I always thought revenge would feel like fire, loud, consuming, the kind of thing that burned everything it touched. But standing there in front of the courthouse, envelope in hand, all I felt was calm. Not peace, not yet, but the kind of calm that settles over you when you've done everything you can and the rest doesn't belong to you anymore. Doug was already unraveling. Indictments pending, city contracts revoked, and a license board that now referred to him in the past tense. Ellen had gone quiet, retreated into that hollow life she'd carved for herself, isolated and trembling behind blinds that never used to close. But there was still one thing left undone. One weight I'd carried alone. I'd found it weeks ago, buried in a folder marked travel. An email Ellen had sent to a firm in another state. Not a vacation agency, an incorporation service. She'd opened a company under my name, backdated the filing, and used it to funnel the stolen funds. Every payment, every transaction tied back to me on paper. If the feds had come early, they'd have seen my name on every document. I would have gone down, not her. That was the last trick. The last blade hidden behind her back. And it had almost worked. The envelope held my answer. Inside was a full affidavit, sworn, notarized, detailed. Names, dates, files. Enough to not just clear my name, but to bury hers beneath the weight of premeditated fraud. My lawyer had seen it. The DA had seen it. They were already preparing a case. But this envelope was personal. It was for Mason. He asked to meet me. Not a text, not a phone call. In person. So we sat on the old bench by Lake Belmore, where I used to take him fishing when he was 8. He barely spoke at first. Just watched the water. I handed him the envelope. He read it, lips tightening as he turned page after page. Then he looked up. "She said you were making it all up," he said. His voice didn't crack. It was flat, like stone. "I know," I replied. But I didn't. He nodded slowly, like something inside him was finally lining up. He didn't cry. Neither did I. But when he said, "I believe you," I swear it was louder than any courtroom gavel. I didn't ask him to choose between us. I wasn't here to win him like a prize. I just wanted him to know. To see. And now he did. I told the DA I'd testify if needed, but I didn't push for jail. I didn't need bars. I needed the truth to hang around Ellen and Doug's necks long enough that every door they knocked on asked the same question. What did you do? And that was already happening. Employers backing away. Friends turning cold. No one wants to stand beside a liar once the mask falls off. Weeks passed. Then a month. I rented a small place out in Dorsey, with a sagging porch and a roof that leaked in 2 spots. It was perfect. Mine. No one else's name on the deed. I fixed the leaks, rebuilt the porch, hung my tool belt by the back door, and started taking work again, not under my old company name, but under my own. Paul Travers, independent. And then, one morning, Mason knocked. He held a box. Inside it were photos, old ones. Us fishing. Christmas mornings. One from the state fair where I'd carried him on my shoulders because his feet hurt. Ellen had kept them all, hidden them. But Mason had found them in the attic. And he brought them to me. "I thought you should have these," he said. Then he added, "She doesn't talk much now. Not since people started asking questions." I thanked him. Didn't ask for more. But as he walked back to his car, he looked over his shoulder and said, "I might come by next week. If that's okay." It was more than okay. I didn't win back everything I lost. That version of my life was gone, and good riddance. But I rebuilt. Not to prove anything. Just to exist on my own terms. And if revenge taught me anything, it's that sometimes the loudest victories are the quiet ones. The ones where the people who wronged you still wake up every morning in the ruins they made, while you calm, steady, build something better right next door. And that's exactly what I did. If Paul's story gripped you, if it made you feel something deep, like, comment, and subscribe for more slow burn revenge stories. Your support keeps the fire lit. Let me know what kind of betrayal you want to see next. The stories are just getting started.